Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining our 8th deep dive series events. And today we're going to go behind the scenes of DNEG's Virtual Production division, offered in collaboration with Dimension Studio. So I'm Steve Jelly. I'm the co-founder of Dimension, and I work as Managing Director with DNEG Virtual Production. I'm excited to be here alongside Zyra, Steve Griffiths, and Callum McMillan. But I'll let them introduce themselves in just a few minutes. For those of you that are new to our deep dive webinar series, DNEG these webinars to spotlight our amazing talent, the people who work here, who use this space to dive deep into their achievements, specialities, and passions. It takes a lot to do virtual production, and if it weren't for the amazing teams that worked on these shows, then we would have nothing to show to you today. So our goal is really for people interested in or currently working in the film industry to learn more and to meet the people behind these projects. So welcome everybody from all around the world, and let me tell you a little bit about how this is going to run. So first of all, we'll introduce ourselves, then we'll dive into our reel with a bit of an overview of DNEG Virtual Production with some of our recent work in-camera visual effects. And then at the end of our presentation, we'll have plenty of time for a Q&A. So if you have questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. You can chat throughout, on the webinar chat, and talk to each other and any comments. But if you have a question that you want us to answer during the Q&A, please write it into the Q&A using the Q&A button, and then we'll address it when we get to Q&A time. And please say where you are in the chat and feel free to talk amongst yourselves as we're talking. Also, please keep in mind that we'll be recording this panel, and we hope to share it on social media at a later date. So without further ado, over to you, Zyra, for some introductions.
Hello, everyone. I'm Zyra. I'm the head of production for DNEG VP. I've joined DNEG in January this year. My background is mostly in VFX. I've been working in VFX for the last 10, 12 years, and in virtual production for the last 3.
Steve.
Hey, my name's Steve Griffith. Executive producer with DNEG Virtual Production. I've been with DNEG for about a year now, along with Zyra. We both started around the same time, and but been in visual effects for about 20 years.
Callum.
Oh, hi everyone. I'm Callum. I'm one of the other co-founders from Dimension and CTO at Dimension, and I work in DNEG VP as head of technology. And I've been working in virtual production in many different disguises for a number of years.
Great. So Zyra, would you like to tell us just a little bit about DNEG VP and who we've become after these years of fast growth?
Yes. So DNEG and Dimension have worked together for the best part of like 2.5 years now. But DNEG VP in its form started earlier this year, and we were a small team. I think when Steve and I joined, around 20 to 25 people, and we are now almost 100 people over that number. We're just hitting 120 mark now. We've got 5 departments within that team. We've got production, content creation, which is essentially everyone who builds any content that goes into our LED screens or previs and post-vis. We've got our on-set team that runs our volumes, and we've got content management as well that links both of these departments. So pretty much optimizing and making sure that everything that we produce is real-time compliant. And then we've got 2 new departments that have become a part of our team recently. Our IT team that helps support our on-set services, and our applied technology team that helps us develop on-set tools and any other technology that we need for our shows.
Thanks, Zyra. So before we play you some of our work, I think Callum would like to show you behind the curtain, as it were, a little bit where we are, where he is right now, and what we're doing.
If I stick my arms out and turn off my background, can you guys see that okay? Just a bit of context for what Zyra was saying about our different departments inside DNEG VP. This is where it all comes together. So I'm currently stood in our LED volume in West London. So this is RD Studios, and this is a volume that we have put together earlier this year. And we've already done some really cracking productions in here. We're very lucky to have this set standing, so we can do a lot of development work and test new kind of processes and pipelines. So just to provide a bit of kind of behind the scenes, if I turn around here and I'll flip my camera around, there we go. So this is the brain bar. So this is Albert and Brad here. Just to give you a sense of what's going on, this is like the control center for our LED wall. So this is an instance of Unreal Engine. So Albert's moving around the 3D world that we have up on the wall there. And if I move over to Bradley Station, what we have here is tracked cameras. So that's real-time camera tracking that's showing the position of our ARRI Mini LF there. So we have a crown on top of the camera, which you'll see in a sec when I walk downstairs. And that's being tracked by lots of infrared cameras, which are all the way around the top of the LED stage and down the sides. So if I just walk quickly downstairs, you'll see a better view. And hopefully I don't fall down the stairs as we do this. So yeah, coming up to the LED volume here. These side panels are called wild walls. So these can be used for lighting and additional coverage. And these are movable. And then this is the main wall. So this is about 21 meters across and about 7.5 meters high. And currently we're showing a scene which we built using photogrammetry actually and LiDAR laser scanning of the Ritzy Cinema in Brixton. So the bit you can see moving on the LED wall, that's called the inner frustum, and that shows the 3D world from the viewpoint of the camera. So if I kind of stand over here, you can see that the world's three-dimensional there, that the back of the street is parallaxing against the side of the Ritzy. And if I stand here, you can see the camera moving around me. There's the crown on top of it, that the cameras on top of the LED wall are tracking in real time that we saw upstairs on the mezzanine. And then if I go here and zoom in a bit, if I can, sorry about my shaky camera work, but you can see the composite of me and the LED wall there. So there you go. That gives you a very whistle-stop tour of, thanks Peter, of RD Studios and where I'm at. I think we're handing back to Zyra now. I believe she's got a video for us to watch.
Great. Thank you, Cal. Yeah, so Steve, I think you were going to show the video of some of our work that we've done over the last couple of years. So enjoy.
Be able to show you a few projects that we want to highlight and that we'll be talking about through this deep dive. But I'll just let it play and then we'll talk about it afterwards. This is Bullet Train. Playback is okay for everybody. This first man. This is Devotion. Kimmy. This is for Pepsi. we selected this not only to show different utilization types of virtual production, but also to show different market utilization. So for advertising, film, television. And we'll go through and talk about each one of these projects in a minute in detail. That's why I'm not really doing too much talking over the demo right now. Project called Fireworks. It's a short film that we helped produce. And this is the environment that Callum has up on the stage right now that we'll talk to you guys about. Great. Now I'll come back to that in a minute. You know, one thing to note about the stage that we just showed you is, you know, there's different sizes of stages that are out there, right? And depending on what application you have, there's giant volumes and, you know, there's tiny volumes, and they all center around different panel counts, and some have ceilings and some don't. Some are different shapes and sizes. Our stage that we have that Callum is at has 5 primary uses. One is a demo stage where we take people and it's educational purposes, showing people what stages, how you use stages, and also training to show new people how to operate stages. R&D, we test color workflow and, you know, different camera packages and lenses, and I mean the gamut of R&D workflow for virtual production, and then some of it's commercial revenue generating projects, you know, whether it's film or advertising or music videos. And then there's a 5th purpose, which we think is critical, which is called a preview stage, which is approving or reviewing content that we create for other virtual production stages. So we might be shooting in, you know, Australia or Georgia or LA, and those shoots will have content that we need to create for those projects, and we will preview that in camera and on our stage to evaluate it in context. And we'll talk a little more about that later, but that's the 5 primary uses of the stage that we have in West London.
Yeah, and I think it's probably worth saying how we see virtual production in terms of the context of filmmaking. You know, it's very much an end-to-end process here at DNEG. You know, it might start with conceptual visualization, concept designs, then go through the process of actually making the imagery that you see behind Cal right now, you know, and then we go into actually filming it on set, working with the production team, and then transferring over all of that data over to visual effects and the production of the final shots. So it's very much part of a continuum, and it's quite a broad sweep of services that we offer. And it's supposed to be, you know, a creative journey. Yeah, I mean, Cal, do you want to speak to some of that stuff as a supervisor yourself?
Yes, I think it's the way I look at virtual production is that it's an umbrella term that captures a lot of different technologies and processes. So, for example, at the pre-production stage, when we're doing previs, you can bring virtual production technologies like virtual camera in or virtual scouting. We can model things in real time in Unreal Engine. We can display that for when you're filming on blue or green screen using a simulcam system. So that's where we replace the blue or green screen in real time with a lower quality but still three-dimensional background to give the filmmakers an approximation of what you're going to see in the final composite, all the way through to what we have here, which is ICVFX, so in-camera visual effects, final pixel quality as photoreal as it possibly can be. You've got motion capture, so we saw in the reel there, and I know we'll talk in more detail in a bit, but the performance capture of facial capture and body capture, these are all things that can be fed in real time into content, which makes it to an LED wall. So yeah, it is end to end, and it is a broad term as well.
Yeah, and I mean, Zaira, as head of production, it's a very different production process, isn't it? To anything resembling anything else that has come across us before.
It is very different, and it's very compressed in many ways. But I find that what has helped us massively was trying to find the language that we communicate with clients and with other partners that try to align what we do with terms that they're used to. So if you're talking to someone that comes from a traditional film background, on set, you can use language that they understand. If you're talking to someone with that comes from a VFX background, you can try to trace parallels to communicate what virtual production is to the different audiences. And I think that has been, the greatest thing about this last year is being able to collaborate with so many different units within a film production, and then find, the way to explain virtual production to them in a way that they could get it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, turning back to in-camera visual effects, which is what our reel mainly features. I mean, Steve, we've both had to, explain this many times about, but you have an interesting formulation about the in-camera composite. And do you want to just define that, and then we can start looking at the work?
Yeah, we call it in-camera VFX for a reason, right? It's a compositing process, and it reminds me a lot of how we used to work back in, the advertising days, where it was a flame workstation, and you had a flame operator in real time assembling a composite for clients. You'd sit in a room and they would say, we want this, and we want, animate this and make it this color, and the compositor in real time would make those changes, and oftentimes with animated content and different layers within the composite. And that's very similar to how we interact with creatives on the volume, right? It's like a large digital map painting to some degree, but you can make changes on the fly. We don't like to make a lot of changes on the fly, but you can. That's one of the advantages of having Unreal scenes, is that you can change lighting direction and do real-time color correction, and in some cases we're building sets in 360 so that our clients can rotate the entire set to see different parts of the environment. So yeah, it's like sitting at a compositor's desk and working in real time as a compositing engine.
Great.
And you want me to bring up the reel?
Yeah, I think it'd be great for us to look at some of the,
Yeah,
just an example of the kind of in-camera composite we're talking about.
So the reel starts with Bullet Train, which I think is a great project to highlight. This was done on an LED volume. It wasn't our volume, but it was shot in LA. And just to go back through here, but we created the environments for this, in all digital environments. And one of the lessons we learned here, which has informed how we create, why we even have our LED stage to begin with, is in some cases we felt like we overbuilt some of the environments, right? We put a lot of detail into these full CG environments that once we put on the wall ended up flying by camera really quickly. And you just never saw some of the detail that you, or we're out of focus, right? And so we might have built some of the details out of this city that just were never seen once you actually look at it through camera. And so one of the reasons why we have our preview wall is to actually look at how the filmmakers are going to be using the content on the screen, what it looks like through camera, what kind of levels of defocus, and basically it's very, very similar to in the VFX process. You would create an asset, but you would never final that asset till you see it through compositing. Well, for us, our compositing engine is the camera, and we want to see things through camera before we final the content. So that's one of the things. That's one of the lessons learned on Bullet Train.
The other thing that is also slightly transformational is this: what you're looking at here is the raw output out of Unreal Engine, which of course doesn't look, completely real, right? Because we always knew it was going to form that background content, that's filmed through a window onto a distant screen, out of focus. So the interesting thing is we built about 4 kilometers, of this kind of train track, in Unreal Engine. We were able to instance and, achieve the content very, very quickly. Some of the content was also achieved using plates and stitch photography and so on and so forth. In what we've highlighted here is the Unreal side of things. And it was modeled based on a video of, the exact bullet train on the path that the movie takes. So what was also quite useful, though, is being able to sort of instance and look dev such a large area of Tokyo and, the outskirts of Tokyo so quickly, and that is one of the things where real-time technologies really helps us. There's no need to individually build every single aspect of Tokyo. There is a repetition in cityscapes that can be procedurally generated, or in the case of this, can be instanced. And this is something that our filmmakers increasingly sort of rely on. It's not a big ask to say, I'm going to set my movie in a particular location and I want to pre-visualize the whole location. In fact, there are many projects that we're working on at the moment that are world building in nature, and they're all going to start with an Unreal visualization of that world. Zaira, do you want to talk a little bit about the content creation process that we would typically go through for something like this?
Yes, so we've got we choose to use the best tool for the job. So we are not fully working in Unreal at all times. We might leverage other tools that are traditional from VFX, such as Maya, Substance, ZBrush, so we will build models in a more traditional fashion, let's say, and we can always import these models into Unreal, and then we do most of our layouts, addressing, and scene building in Unreal, and then we do our final lighting and look dev in Unreal and on stage. So that's our content creation process in a nutshell.
Oh, and Callum, I know you did a lot of work on the making this look right to camera. Is there something that you want to pull in from your SIGGRAPH talk?
Well, yeah, thanks, Steve. I think the call out for me on this one is that there was practical photography. So there was array plates of Tokyo that had been filmed on a I think it was a 3-camera array, and they wanted to do a center projection from the carriage. So if you imagine the kind of predominantly the action was taking place in the middle of the carriage, so that is how things were filmed on the array plate. So what we did in Unreal Engine was we matched that array. So the camera setup in Unreal was based on the same array layout. We had similar kind of lens setups and distortions, and we stitched a spherical lat long to behave the same way as the filmed content when it was presented to the wall. And then upon that, we did the standard thing of outputting all the render layers out of Unreal, because we had the luxury of, although this was playing back plates in real time, prepping this in advance, we were able to do the traditional VFX render layer passes as well.
Great. Cool. So should we look at the next one, Steve?
Yep, absolutely. So the next thing is the next project is First Man that we have in here, and what's interesting to note about First Man is, and it was one of the first projects to really utilize an LED wall, right? There's a few projects that defined virtual production in terms of LED wall utilization. One was Murder on the Orient Express. We have First Man, again, things that predated Mandalorian, which then, you know, made it, popularized it in a whole nother level. But you know, one of the teams that we partner with on virtual production is a group called Monolith out of Los Angeles on the infrastructure side, and their chief architect goes by Fred Waldman. He worked on this project with us and helped design this wall. But you know, it was both used for in-camera VFX as well as reflections, and you could see how well it integrated in these shots, and you know, sometimes the bits outside the window were replaced in CG, but and in other times they were used as pure in-camera VFX.
And actually,
and reflections.
And this is setting up a real theme, isn't it? Which is vehicles on gimbals, you know, which we've done a great deal of, I think. I mean, and this is turning into being one of the classic reasons to do virtual production, isn't it, Steve?
Absolutely, especially because vehicles are highly reflective, and your performers want to have something to interact with and see for eye lines. And you know, whether it's a dogfight or whether, you know, we're looking at, you know, what is our talent looking at as they're getting ready to be launched into space, or whether they're fighting in a dogfight.
Devotion is which is what comes after this in the reel, which is out in cinemas now. Please go and see it. Steve, you worked on this with photographic plates, didn't you?
Yeah, so a company went out and shot these background plates, which we stitched together. And again, our partners at Monolith designed the LED wall, which is very similar to the First Man wall. And here you go, the final product speaks for itself, right? Well integrated lighting, great in-camera VFX, and you know, but it just goes to show that these, you know, this is the low-hanging fruit for virtual production, right? Is these gimbal rigs and the motion base, and it could be car process too. We have some examples of car process shots down the road in the reel as well. You know, and not all content needs to come from Unreal, right? Like a lot of this has come from plates. A lot of this stuff from First Man came from plates, and as Cal mentioned, even on Bullet Train. So, you know, which is why one of our departments, internally, instead of it being called VAD or the Unreal department or whatever, it's content creation, because whether it's a 2D plate or a 2.5D pan and tile or digital map painting, or whether it's a full Unreal theme, you know, the content's created in a variety of different DCC packages. You know, it's just content, and it goes on a wall, just like in any other composite, right? It can come from a lot of different departments.
Yeah, it's whatever works. And I mean, this is, on the other hand, working with photography, you've got to know what your shot is. And actually, this was really interesting. If on the next thing, we have this motorbike shot for The Rising, which was done for Sky Studios. This shot here, which was a shot they knew they couldn't get, you know, in any other way. You know, our lead character is in a MotoGP race, and outside they wanted to have that lock off on the look in her eyes as she goes around this, and this was all shot using a GoPro, you know, at an actual event, and then lined up on the stage with a leaf blower. Cal, you were on this as well. I mean, this was remarkably successful. But do you want to talk about the lineups a bit, because that's tricky?
Yeah, it was to sell this. You know, we were surprised by how well this worked. You know, the GoPro footage put on the LED wall behind. Couple of very simple things we did to help that composite. We changed the shutter angle, so we went for a skinny shutter on the actual rig and the motorbike and the performer. And although that perhaps didn't match the shutter angle of the live action plate, it did, funnily enough, sell the fact that you were there with the motorbike, or, you know, doing the MotoGP race. And then there was, yeah, practical SFX that went in there, like wind. And I think at certain points we had people literally throwing lumps of dirt up at her visor on cue. So you know, it was this blend of the practical and the virtual, and it came together exceedingly well, based on the fact we're shooting plates here. It's 2D plates. It's photographic, which is great, but it's not 3-dimensional. So the other thing we had to do sometimes was cheat the angle a little bit. I think there's the shot of her beside the car, or the nighttime shot as well, where actually the DOP chose an angle to push in on the motorbike that was not the angle that had been filmed on the plate, but we were able to get like a, you know, 10-15 degrees kind of cheat, if you like, and just do a planar rotation of that plate on the LED wall, so a 2D plate in 3D space essentially. And again, we were skeptical whether that would work, but I think I think the work speaks for itself. It was successful.
Yeah.
One of the questions out there was, what is a plate in this context? A plate is just, you know, photography or video footage that we shoot on a location, and then we play that back on the LED wall. Just to answer that question.
Yeah, and somebody else has commented on, you know, does it throw up less problems than green screen? And the answer is yes, absolutely yes. And if we're on the subject of cinematographers and why cinematographers like to shoot in a volume, it is precisely because of that. It's the light wrap that it gives the subject, if correctly used and correctly lit, you know, as being a much more satisfying shot. And you can see that composing an image like the one we have on the screen, you know, is down to the DP. And if that was a green screen shot, then, you know, in a VFX workflow, we would probably be looking at a replacement of many elements and a green screen composite, which would not be as, yeah, you can probably achieve a similar result, but the director of photography would not have control over that process. That would be a visual effects process at that point. So I think that's fair to say. Anything else about the interactive lighting? Because this is the kind of, Kimmy's a great example of this, actually, I think, in terms of, you know, which was shot on a volume. Steve, do you want to talk to this? This was yours.
Yeah. So again, this project was shot on a volume that Monolith built out for New Line. It's a Steven Soderbergh project called Kimmy. There was 2 walls outside of each of, you know, she was in an apartment, and there were 2 sides to her apartment where she had windows. Well, and outside of each there were these 2 LED walls, and they wanted to be able to have some parallax. So in the case of Kimmy, some of this was 2.5D content where it was 2D elements that were on cards that we achieved parallax, not necessarily through a full Unreal scene or render, but through a touch designer workflow. And you know, for this, you know, doing this as green screen, you know, with all this, with as much foreground props and on-set production design and the you know, the window paneling, you know, it would have looked like a green screen composite, but having the natural light from the panels and you know, and this is a daytime scene. That's one of the things that gets criticized a lot is full, you know, daytime scenes, which there are issues, right? And you know, the panels can't necessarily mimic you know, sunlight and the degree to which you want your sun to be, the brightness of the sun, but but they can do, it's not like you can't do daytime scenes. This is a good example of a well-executed daytime scene that comes across as photoreal, I think, in ICVFX. And being able to look out the window and achieve some parallax too. In the case of some of these scenes. And this is a good example too, right? You see up in the rafters here, right? One way to do camera tracking would be using optical cameras like a Vicon or an OptiTrack. But because those cameras would have been up towards the ceiling here and you would have seen it in some of the shots, we opted for a Stipe camera tracking process, which is basically a constellation and a constellation that's up on the ceiling that the camera itself is on the camera, versus there being the camera surrounding the virtual production stage or being somewhere on your set, and then so it's intrinsic versus intrinsic.
Quick way to put it is inside out versus outside in tracking.
And it's the right tool for the job question, isn't it? It's like if you're tracking a small volume like the interior of a house or an apartment like this, you need one thing, and if you're tracking a massive volume, you're doing something else, Cal. I mean, we've also used some new technology, haven't we, to sort of track very large spaces and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, camera tracking is intrinsic to LED volume production. Really, if you're doing 2.5D or 3D, you need it. And even if you're doing 2D, it's very useful to have a tracked camera for post-viz, for example, to get you a match move quickly. That data can be passed on down the pipeline. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Optical tracking systems like Vicon and OptiTrack, we use Vicon here at RD, so we've got Vicon cameras up here behind me. But then, we trialed on Pinocchio, we trialed ultra wideband radio. So that's a non-optical system. So that's using radio waves, beacons essentially, which has a puck which receives those radio waves on the top of the camera and triangulates its position in real time. And it wasn't perfect. It has got a lot better. But key things you can do with that versus optical is you can rig the beacons behind blue screen drape. So you don't necessarily need line of sight between what's on top of the camera to receive that positional information and the things that are emitting it. You've also got the scalability of it. So an OptiTrack system for a volume like we've got here may require 40 to 50 cameras, which it comes with a price tag of hundreds of Ks. The ultra wideband system could do the same volume with 12 beacons, and there you have a huge price saving. So it's horses for courses. There's loads of different tracking systems, inside out, outside in, different solutions, and what we try and do is stay agnostic and validate the correct one for the correct use case.
Great,
Thank you,
Cal. Crazily, we're coming up on time for Q&A. So what we might do is just try and answer some of these questions while we go through the remainder of the reel and the deep dive. Zaira, do you want to look through this stuff with me? We use Unreal 5.1. Let's just put that together. It's the new branch for virtual production from Epic. It's still in beta, and obviously Unreal 5 is out, but it fixes all of the problems. So move on with that. I mean, content creation, Zaira, there's a question about that, about how we use do we use Megascan?
We leverage all these different tools. So it's what Steve G mentioned before, that we might use plates, we might use scans, we might use assets that we build from scratch. So it's a bit of a mixed bag of which tool is the best one for the job and what kind of content we are trying to create.
But in general, right, our clients tend to want uniquely built assets, right? So if we use something from Megascans, it's usually highly modified before it actually becomes an in-camera VFX, and a lot of what our team does is build from scratch, right? We're building custom assets that are at the bequest of our creative direction from clients.
Cool. There's a bunch of questions about how we determine whether VP is the right methodology. I mean, I can answer that quickly. So when Steve and I receive a script and we break it down, we always separate what you can do practically, what's in camera visual effects, what's a visual effects shot, and we don't prejudge, the right tool for the job, so it is very, very customized, and it depends on the needs of each show. And very often you'll shuttle some things into the volume, some things out of the volume, and then of course time happens, and then everybody goes through pre-production, and then that changes, and then as you're shooting, that changes. So we need to remain very nimble about what we do and what we don't do throughout production, is the simple answer to that. There's a question about like the amount of computers that you have, Callum. I'm sure you'd like to answer that. It's a lot.
And the types of machines as well.
Yeah, I saw one about the panels as well. So the panel that we use here is a Blackpool 2 V2, which is from Row Creative Display. It has a dot pitch of 2.84 millimeters. So it's the pixel pitch is close, but there are panels coming out that are even closer together with the pixel pitch. The good thing about BP2V2 is that it can still output a decent amount of luminance. So it can go to 1500 nits. We calibrate our wall and we run it at about half that. We run about 710 nits there or thereabouts. In terms of compute, we're heavily reliant on NVIDIA GPUs, and we run two A6000 GPUs in each render node. And if I pick the phone up, what we've done with our wall here is we've divided it into 3 sections, basically. So you've got render node 1, render node 2, render node 3, and that each one of those has 2 GPUs in it, which renders the inner frustum and the outer frustum. So the bit that was behind me at the start of the presentation, and then everything outside for interactive lighting, those 2 things are balanced between the GPUs. And then above me, there will be a ceiling at some point, and then obviously the wild walls that I was pointing at earlier, they're on separate render heads as well. So this is actually still a reasonably small setup. You can get compute clusters where we're talking, hundreds of GPUs or more than 100. It really comes down to the number of panel that you've got and what you're expecting to kind of put through it in terms of the content. That said, Unreal 5.1, as Steve mentioned, is doing really good things with how scenes can be optimized for playback on an LED wall, both in terms of the sort of way polygons are handled and meshes, and then also in the color science as well, and the color pipeline. Really good things are happening on both of those fronts, which means that the compute doesn't have to be so brute force. We're getting a bit more refined with how we optimize the content before it makes it to the LED wall.
We've got a couple of questions about education and training that I can jump into. So we partnered really closely with Epic, and then there are a lot of, like, for the content creation portion, there's a lot of training available. But we've also developed our own modules that we train our team and anyone joining our team on how to, just get familiarized with our workflows. Regarding partnerships with universities and other educational institutions, yeah, we're more than happy to partner. So just get in touch with us after this panel. We would like to collaborate as much as possible. It's a growing industry, but we know that we need, to build a team as virtual production evolves further and further. We need more of us, really. So the more partnerships we can do with educational institutions, the better for us as well.
That's great. There's a great question about infinite parallel light sources on the volume, which I think is, and as Steve showed with Kimmy, the wall is basically a really great parallel light source. It's just quite diffuse and it has a limited amount of brightness. So for parallel light sources that are very, very directional, like the sun, at midday or nobody ever wants to actually shoot the sun at midday. But if you have that, then you do need a bank of traditional lights that have very powerful light output, which is why the ceiling that why the stage that Cal's on right now doesn't actually have a ceiling above it, because a couple of weeks ago we had a bunch of lights up there. So that's the simple answer to that question. So it's great for some things, not for others.
We've got a good question about who comprises the brain bar.
Yeah, so for those of you that weren't at the start of the talk, we've got various seats up on the brain bar. Key to kind of coordinating it all will be a virtual production supervisor. We actually tend to try and run with 2 supervisors or one virtual art department supervisor and 1 VP soup. So if I flick my camera back round, up on the brain bar, we've got various seats across the top, but you've got Unreal Engine volume TD. So that person's running Unreal in editor mode and controlling all the content which is played out on the render cluster. So that person's looking after the render machines. Next to them, you've got tracking. So the tracking technician is looking after the calibration of the volume, all the Vicon cameras, and making sure that our tracking tech on the camera is correctly configured. So this is the crown, and calibrating the crown's position to the lens and the nodal point of the lens. So when we look at the volume, everything tracks correctly. And then alongside there, we've got AV engineering to make sure that the video signals make it all around the volume to different places. So if you imagine on a production day down here, we've got hundreds of people. We've got the director, DOP, DIT, production. This place is rammed and everybody needs screens and content piped around the volume. And then alongside that, we'll have a virtual art department artist up there. So someone to make changes to the content and update it prior to it going on the wall, or when someone's working in real time and you've got the content live, the next shot can be prepped and ready to go. So it's a mixture of art and tech, basically, with leadership performed by virtual production supervisor.
So
we've got
Steve,
another question. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Well, Steve, there's a couple of questions about the cost benefit of virtual production. I mean, would you like to sort of answer that? I mean, there's the low-hanging fruit that we've discovered about certain things that are impossible to shoot any other way, but obviously there's more than that than we do. Would you like to talk to that at all? I mean, or is that a killer question? We can talk about it together.
No, I mean, it's not a killer question, but I mean, start with your thoughts and I'll add to it.
Okay, well, so my feeling is it's always justifiable to sort of go through the expense of doing an expansive cityscape or something like that and shooting on it in multiple locations if you know it's going to solve certain other production problems, like if you're going to return to the location, if you're going to spend a lot of shoot days shooting on it, if you have talent scheduling considerations, those kinds of things. And that's very often the business case that we fall into, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, our technology works really well if you can amortize cost, like you mentioned, if you're going to be returning to multiple locations, or things like episodic, right, where you have environments where you're always going to be at. I think one of the things to consider with virtual production is because there's accessibility is one thing, but actually this brings up something in the reel that I'm going to bring up real quick. This is a good use case, right? This is Pepsi wanted to shoot 8 different spots in 8 different locations. They're simple, right? Could they have gone to an apartment and shot this apartment? Sure. Now, and say to what you're saying, Steve, if it's an episodic and this is this guy's apartment and he's always going to be there every episode, then you're spreading that cost across multiple episodes. But in this case, these were one-off environments, right? Where it's an apartment, it's an office. There was 6 other spots within this commercial series, but instead of going to 8 different locations within 6 weeks or whatever their schedule was, they want to do it in 4 days. So we did 8 spots in 4 days, back to back, on 2 volumes, shot one and on one half of the day, then turned around to the other side of the volume and did the other thing, and we were able to do 8 spots in 4 days, right? Which from a production schedule reduced your overall shoot days. And they're really simple, right? Could they have gone to an office and shot this? Sure, but it was just as easy to bring these locations to the stage. So there isn't one answer that fits it all. It's really it's per project, right? And it's a use case in terms of where it would save money and where it wouldn't.
And it's a really good one. The other one that we've talked about lots is the haunted house scenario. You want to shoot a haunted house movie, and it's an independent movie. You find a haunted house and go shoot in it. But you can also do that in a VP stage. So you just need to write for it, so that, and then you can, of course, make your house as big as you like. You can travel down corridors which aren't there. You can really get the maximum amount of it and shoot more in less time. And I think that's the other benefit, is the time saving, because when it's quick, it's really quick. Cal, I think, what's the most number of setups that we've done in a day for shooting?
I think on Pinocchio, these were scenes we'd already shot once, so in fairness, they were prepped. But on Pinocchio, we went through about 30 scenes, about 27 to 30 scenes in one day. But they were pickups, so it was on it, off it. But yeah, the utility of it really shines through in those kind of scenarios.
Yeah. Cool. So.
We've got one question that I find it's important for us to cover. It's, where can I learn more about virtual production? And I know that for someone coming new to this, it could come across as, oh my God, there's so much information. But what I found that helped me a lot, a couple of years ago when I was starting on this journey, was the 2 field guides that Noah Cannon wrote, and I think they were commissioned by Epic. It's a great starting point for anyone wanting to just get an overview and then find out where we are in this world and which area they're more interested in.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
There's also a question in here which is talking about the creation of the Ritzy environment behind Callum, and that's also in the reel that we have, which might be great to go through, because that talks about it goes through everything, right? There's plate acquisition, there's 2.5D projection, there's 3D Unreal creation. I mean, Callum, do you want to go into that question?
Yes, I'd probably also tie that in with another one I saw, which was a question saying, will virtual production in the future replace post-production in things like Houdini? And I think the short answer is no. And what I want to say is, I want to expand on what Steve was saying earlier about the fact that we use all kinds of different content here. We call it content creation because we use different DCC packages, right? And that isn't going to change. What's actually going to happen is we're going to get tighter integration between things like Houdini and Unreal Engine. We're seeing the bridge between those 2 particular packages getting better. So things like particle systems and lighting and everything are benefiting from that integration. So yeah, just bringing that round to Ritzy, we used a range of different techniques here to capture this. So we went and did a LiDAR scan. There's the point cloud you can see there on the screen right now. So we laser scanned the facade, and then we also did ground-based photogrammetry. So we went round with mirrorless camera rig and took loads of photographs. And then those 2 data sets were combined in, I think it was reality capture, to get the base capture. Now, we could have done, if you could get a license for it, you could do drone photography and get an aerial based capture as well, both using RGB stills photography and laser capture. And then once this had been reconstructed, there was more work to do to it. So this went to the art team to put in the materials so we get proper real-time reflections in the windows and add the lighting under the canopy and the Ritzy logo. So there was more refinement to basically make this object react properly in terms of light and physics once it's in the engine. In that respect, you're doing stuff that's akin to some of the pipelines that exist in VFX and some of it that exists in games production, actually. but that world building process is definitely multi-software and goes across various disciplines.
Thanks, Cal.
Steve, we've got a question that I'm not sure if we can answer, but I'm going to try. Have we leveraged any volumetric capture with our VP pipeline?
We have, yeah, we have done, we've taken volumetric capture into visual effects, and we've also taken it onto the wall. You will see the results of some of that shortly, but I can't talk about that right now.
But yes, we're big fans of volumetric capture, as Andreas should know if he's still on the call.
Yeah. Wonderful. I mean, we're 2 minutes from the end. We're going to have to end shortly. Any closing words from any of you, like a last thought to leave us with?
Well, there's a lot of questions around people that want to get into the industry, right? I'm seeing that kind of come up time and time again. So maybe just one little note about if you're trying to get into virtual production, it's an odd thing to get into, right? The entry point is visual effects, but it's also on set, and their universities haven't really caught up with the curriculum. There's a few that are teaching virtual production technologies. There's a few universities that have their own LED walls and are teaching some of the tools, but it's kind of an on-the-job training thing, right? And so, the best way is to get some. I think VFX experience is probably your best gateway into it, because it is a visual effects process to some degree. Yes, we have a lot of on-set things that we do, but it's not all on set, right? And so, getting somehow into learning Unreal, it's really hard to find Unreal expertise. That's probably one of the biggest things, is getting as much Unreal expertise and having an Unreal reel, right? Creating content in Unreal that looks photorealistic, and having any amount of Unreal experience, and then building a reel to show those skills, right? Like, we don't necessarily, I mean, education is important, but what you create and what your skill sets are in DCC applications is the most valuable component.
And I guess I can add to this as well, speaking as a production person, that production is also a route, right? So not all the roles in virtual production are technical and need to be, you don't need to necessarily be an artist or a TD to join this journey. So do look at the roles that you have within virtual production, because it's a great entry point. And whilst you're there, you might find something that interests you more, and then you can always transition. But yeah, one of the roles that we have that I don't know if existed before virtual production, but we've got a mix of a data wrangler with a digital continuity person who helps, like a script supervisor would on a practical set. It covers that kind of role, but within our virtual environments and the work that we do in VP specifically, which is a great hybrid between production and technical and creative, and attention to detail of a script supervisor. There are so many options out there. So get curious, keep talking to other people in the industry, reach out on LinkedIn, and you will find opportunities that suit your skills.
Last words, Cal. We've got to end it here.
Come and have some fun on a volume if you're in London. Happy to show people around.
Great. Well, look, thank you so much for tuning into this. That's all the time we have, but thanks so much for coming to the DNEG Deep Dive, and we hope to see you at our next one. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.